Hear me now?
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Steve.
Hello, Brian. How are you doing?
Good. Well,
Good.
thanks for waking up really, really early.
Oh, I wake up about 5 o'clock in the morning anyway every day, so I'm good. I'm good to go. Except of course
Okay.
I'm freaking out about doing this. So other than that,
Well, I'm a little nervous too, actually. I found myself being kind of nervous because my daughter's here. She's in
oh,
the other room. I got her set up. Um,
I'm
it,
a fan of your daughter's. I've seen her in the other videos. She's welcome to join us. She's probably going to add more intelligence to the conversation than I can. So
well, this is possible, but but anyway, nonetheless, thanks for agreeing to talk to me for this thing. I know that I don't think you have a huge history of doing tons of interviews about your teenage hardcore band, so I
uh,
appreciate that.
this is the second one in 40 years. So yeah, not too much practice.
Okay, well, I'll try to make it
No, it's all.
easy. I thought of a few questions, and I'll just ask you
Yeah,
them, and
yeah. Let's have a
you
chat.
can let's have a chat. But let me set up the context for this
Sure.
chat, though, for the 20 to 30 people that will inevitably be watching this. The the story behind this chat basically is that not quite 40 years ago, but almost. And I think I'm 55 years old, so you're roughly my
50,
age.
56. Yep.
You're 56. Okay. So the context basically is in the early 80s, I became aware of your band that you had, the Neos or Neos. I'm not sure what you guys went by.
Doesn't matter.
Both.
You're
Doesn't
saying
matter.
our name is so miraculous that you can say it any way you like.
Yeah. So the whole context of me talking to you almost 40 years after this fact is kind of a interesting situation, I guess.
Mhm.
But the Neos were when I was a tape trader, letter writer in the early to mid 80s punk scene and reader of Maximum Rock and Roll. I came across, the second Neos record
Mhm.
and read about it in one of those early issues and stuff. And I remember getting it and just, loving it. And I still love that record, even though it's almost 40 years later. It's like this little thing that's like this little gem of a obscure pioneering recording. And that's just me saying that. I'm
Oh,
not saying that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. But the Neos are quite legendary and with a very small select arraignment of weird people from all walks of life all over the world. And
Yeah.
they a lot of people from NoFX to the drummer for this metal drummer guy Gene Hoglan. All these people um, have always paid lip service
Yeah.
to really liking your band. So that's the context of the situation. Better late than never. It might have been 40 years, but
Yeah, no, it's sure interesting, and I'm glad that the way you described it is a bunch of weirdos, random weirdos who, no offense, Brian, who are into this is everything I could ask for because certainly popularity with the great masses is not something of interest to the Neos or myself. So
right. And I think I'm going to ask a few questions here to
yeah,
start off and see how it goes. But you started the Neos basically at the end of the 70s, 79 to 80, I guess. And
December '79. There you go. Just squeezed in to calling ourselves a '70s punk band, just by a hair.
just by a hair, yeah. And I've never been to Victoria, but I know Victoria is on the other side of Vancouver, and there's like a long ferry ride that you have to
Yeah.
take to get to the mainland from where Victoria is. So is there like a bunch of ferries that leave every 2 hours?
Yeah. It's Victoria's Vancouver Island is a large island on the west coast of Canada. It's right across the water from Vancouver, and
Yeah.
it's about a an hour and a half, 2 hour ferry ride. and they go, yeah, the ferries go back and forth every couple hours. Like it's a pretty busy route between because they're close together, and Victoria's the capital city, so
Yeah.
of the province. So yeah, no, Vancouver and Victoria are very in a weird, like almost interchanged or interlocking, but musically speaking, especially at that time, it was a really much of a divide. Like a few Vancouver bands came over to play. Nobody in Vancouver gave a damn about what was happening in Victoria because it was very uncool. And so, yeah, musically, the scenes were pretty divided back then, at least.
Right, right. So when you say that you guys were uncool, what exactly does that mean? Like, what were you doing that was so uncool compared to what was going on in Vancouver?
Yeah, Vancouver. I mean, I love. There's this compilation called Vancouver Complications. I think it's actually called, from about 78 or 79, that has all
Yeah.
the Vancouver bands from that time. And I still think that's an amazing record. So, I mean, I think they had really good bands. But, DOA was like the forefront of that group. So they
Of
were,
course.
big dudes in their early 20s that like to brawl and drink beer and urinate on things. And they were very, it was just very kind of very punk. And Victoria was just a bunch of like quite a bit younger, skinny high school kids that had never played in bands before, and just were weird. And we just weren't making an impression on those folks at all. So, which is fine. We it was a 2-hour ferry ride away. We were teenagers. It was a big deal to go borrow someone's car and get over there. So we didn't care. We just did our own thing. They came over occasionally and played, but it was very separate. Like, I don't think most people in Vancouver even knew they were bands from Victoria or cared. And, we were fine with that.
Right. So you guys were this bunch of, you guys were kind of a bunch of younger nerds.
Yeah, we didn't think we were nerds. We thought we were super. Yeah, exactly. When they came over and played and brought their entourage, it was pretty intimidating. We were cowering in the corners while they beat each other to death on the dance floor for the most part. But yeah, so very, very different scenes, and that they rarely met together. I mean, as we got older, they did, because people from Victoria started moving there and there was more interchange. But in the early 80s, it was very, very separate. So.
Right.
I think No Means No eventually were the first band to really cross over, into Vancouver eventually, right? They got some notoriety. So.
Right. Well, what about your like early influences? I think I saw that Victoria documentary that somebody made.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think DOA, obviously, you brought them up. They were obviously the linchpin band. But like, what else were you listening to that made you decide to go, well, you know what? We need to try to be the fastest band in the world. Like, what was influencing you to say, well, we really need to speed this up and just try to be super, super fast?
Yeah, I think youth hormones, virginity, frustration. I think it was more based on like our actual personalities than sort of a musical thing. I mean, I can't deny that. I think stuff like the Dickies and some of the DOA stuff, some of the early DOA stuff, like Nazi training camp and stuff. They were pretty fast by punk standards. And that seemed pretty thrilling. Every time there was a faster song, that's when everybody, started leaping around. So I think we're all, all being 14, 15, 16-year-olds, it was just a chance to go a little nuts. So that really was, I think it really just came out of that energy of, we couldn't really not play fast. I mean, our drummer, who was in elementary school, he was in like the jazz band in elementary school, and was playing the snare drum. That was his job. Tap, 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 and constantly drove the music teacher crazy, going tap, 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 while the little flautists and clarinet players were trying to like play some anthem or something. He'd just start blasting along. This was before any of us had heard of punk rock. So I think, he just was, we were all just naturally tuned to being vibrating all the time and being hyper energetic. So I think it was more inevitable that no matter what we played, no matter what speed it was supposed to be played at, it was going to come out 5 times faster than that by the time we got to the end of the song. So I think that's
right. And you brought up virginity too, which is
I'm still working on that, Brian. I'm trying. It's going to happen for me soon.
No, that was the very well. I remember hearing all these records way before any of that stuff happened, way before having any life experience, and just you really kind of captured the whole thing, which is like we're young, we have hormones,
Yeah.
we don't really know any girls, we're way too young to even think about any of that stuff, but we're still gonna,
Yeah.
that was a big influence on
Yeah. It was
fast hardcore from young nerd.
It was a good place to put all that energy, that you weren't going to get to expend the way nature intended for quite a few years yet. So just like, get it out in another way. And the more you did it, the further the girls ran away from you. So that just helped, it's like you didn't have to worry about coming into their sphere at all because they had no interest in you at that point. So yeah, no, there's definitely an element of that there. I mean, that's probably what destroyed the Neos was the eventual loss of virginity of the members, just made it irrelevant at that point, right? It's like now anyway, we won't.
The secret's out.
Secret's out. Yeah, exactly.
So you're like a lot of people discovering this weird music, and the story is kind of the same based on almost anybody you talk to about why they discovered punk rock or wherever you want to call that stuff. You're pretty isolated up in Victoria, more or less, even with Vancouver and stuff. So I think the next step for a lot of people, that for me certainly when I was a kid, was like discovering the whole writing letters kind of thing. Were you the letter writer guy in the Neos?
We kind of all were, actually. I might have done it first only because I think my parents' address was the one on the record. You had to put some address on the record. So it was my house that ended up on there. So I think I started getting the letters. And then when it was more than I could handle, I, started handing them out, and everybody got their pen pals going. And, but yeah, it was, So, I mean, I know Kev ended up with Jay Maskus and some other folks early on. That was his group. And I was writing with Nick from Rudimentary Peni. It was kind of my feel. And I think Mario maybe took on the Brazilian crew. And so we all kind of had our own little pen pals. We're sending out fan letters, right? Like I sent a fan letter basically a fan letter to the Dead Kennedys, which resulted in making a connection with Jello and that. So it was an interesting time. Like it really was a time where you could reach out to people no matter who they were, and you had a really good chance of connecting with them. It's pretty awesome that way, right? That was very cool.
It was great. It was like the lifeblood of everything behind. It was like behind the scenes lifeblood of everything. And it's another one of those things. I always forget how old I am.
Yeah.
But, I'm old. So it's weird to see time pass and to sort of think back about how special that sort of that act alone of actually, I can write to these people and they don't know I'm a loser. They'll probably write me back and they'll probably be nice. And 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what happened. It's really hard.
I think for all of us, and that point was like wherever we were getting zero interest and attention from the people we lived in, the towns we lived in, right? There was just zero. So you went halfway across the world to find the next person who would show some interest. It just didn't matter in a way. It was like, you're building up this club of 100 people who cared, and they were just all over the planet. And it's so different. I mean, that's something that I know we're going to talk like old men, because guess what, we are. But, I remember growing up and almost talking to my grandparents about the transition from carts riding around their town to cars, and how it just changed everything in their communities, everything in their lives. It, changed the idea of space and time and everything else. And, for us, it's the internet thing. It just completely changes the idea of communication, the speed of it, and so it's hard to really, compare anything. It's just different. It's good and bad, but it's so different that you really can't replicate that.
It's hard to convey that there wasn't really going to be a whole lot of people interested in what you did because it was just a very small universe. But it was easy to tap into it, but only if you actually made the effort to write a letter and I had the same kind of motivation. I didn't have any friends, and I wanted to know about all this stuff, and I didn't have like a cool group of people that wanted to write letters to some somebody in fucking, Brazil or Spain or England or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was really exciting.
Yeah, what was funny about that is that the people who, I'm an over communicator. So if I was going to write to somebody, it was going to be some long letter going into every detail about stuff on their record and like really, freaking out about what they were doing. And and those people that I'm kind of talking about, like Jay Mascis and Nick Blinko and the guys from Ojo Seco and that, they were sort of the same, right? Like they were really obsessive and they would do that. There was like a next phase in like 82 or 83, maybe 83 more, where we started getting these constant, letters from somebody in Czechoslovakia just with like a stamp thing in it saying, hardly any English, but basically just a couple lines saying, here's some stamps, send me records or something, just like sort of just demanding, like, I'm here, give something to me. And that, I was always like, I don't care about that. Like if you're just sending out hundreds of these things trying to like build some collection of records, it's like if there's not a connection, if you've got a connection to this music, awesome. And if you don't, let's just move on. Like I'm not trying to build a worldwide fan base here. I just want to connect with other people who are similarly obsessed and in love with what all this is. So but those people that I talked about who we connected with, they ended up being people who mostly like did interesting things or kind of like remained as, points of interest over the long term because they were just really interesting people who really cared about the stuff. So.
Right. And also people that also still have their obsessions about music or art or whatever, that kind of thing. So I want to ask you about a few songs.
Sure.
We're gonna start with the second record, Jungle Beat. I think that's what it's called. It's
wow.
One song that's completely different sounding because everything else is super, super fast and just on the edge of chaos.
Yeah.
The Jungle Beat is like this really weird, it's interesting you brought up Nick Blinko from Rudimentary Penile, and that's like the one song on that record that to me sounds like even creepier than the creepiest Rudimentary Penile songs. It just sounds like a song being played backwards and all those voices and stuff.
Yeah.
What was the story behind that song, and why wasn't there any more of those kind of songs?
I think they just never got recorded. So what happened was that was probably one of the last songs that got written. So we were just going from hardcore. It's funny, I've got in my head this record that's coming out. It's got like a 20,000 word pile of horseshit that I wrote for it. I just spilled in my guts about it. And a lot of the stuff is kind of in there in more detail, but we all started listening to everything else. Like I was really into classical music, whatever, pop music. Kev was getting into metal. That was kind of just changing and breaking out there. Mario was into, Mario was into soul. He was into Little Stevie Wonder. Right. It was just like our tastes were just going every direction, and we hated it anyway. Like at that point, hardcore, once it became hardcore, and it was like a genre, the kind of first genre in punk rock that was so specific, and people were arguing about it. You're hardcore, you're not hardcore, you're this, it has to be like that. That for us was the death of music, right? It was just like, that's not how to make interesting music by trying to like get so specific about what this is going to be. So I think, we were just, we were like kids who loved rock and roll and pop music, heard punk rock, went down that rabbit hole, just loved that. But we're hungry right away for like, what else? Like, what else have we not discovered? What's out there? We don't know anything. We listen to AM radio in this little town. We know nothing about music. So you just start getting fascinated by it. And you go in all these directions.
Right.
So we were definitely like musically, I'm like the worst musician in the band. I have no problem saying that. The drummer was, I think actually a brilliant drummer. He's really, really good. You can probably speak to that better than I can because you're a drummer.
Oh yeah, he's great.
He's a great drummer, right? And
it's a blistering performance throughout.
But he, when we were to hang out and just jam and goof around, I mean, he would be playing, even before he got into Little Stevie Wonder or whatever, because he had some took some jazz training, and so he was just playing these crazy, funky rhythms and all this intricate stuff just to entertain himself, when we weren't playing the Neil song. So I think it was always in him. He had an actual very soulful groove under all that insanity. That was waiting to get out. And, Kev is actually even then was a better guitar player than I am. He just played bass because that was the only thing left to play, right? So we just went, okay, well, you should be in the band. Let's play the bass. So anyway, we were going, the songs that came after that were had classical, literally had classical, very basic classical musical elements in them, like stuff from Beethoven in them. They had soul stuff in them. There was metal stuff coming into them. There was weird pop punk. So the record that never got made would have been something that either would have been a breakthrough or the worst piece of garbage ever, that would have, I know it would have absolutely horrified anybody who liked the second Neil's record. They would have hated it. But it also, it's hard to say because it was going to be so bizarre. And trying to play it, we were trying to play some of these songs live. It was so weird. So anyway, Jungle Beat was kind of the first song where I was just going, I'm just, it was kind of like a droning riff that was just a weird Middle Eastern in my mind kind of thing to it. And it was just this guitar kind of lick that I came up with. And, the drummer right away, and I keep saying the drummer and I apologize because it's I know he's ab to the world. His real name is Mario. He's the person who does not want anything to do with it. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is, anybody, whatever. I'm just going to help myself. I'm just going to say Mario because that's who he is. But, he just immediately started playing this great, polyrhythmic thing over top of it. And then Kev was like, I know what I'm going to do. So he just started noodling, just played some completely off the wall bass thing that had nothing to do with what we were doing. So it was great. So we would do that. And then, lyrically, it became I was right at the point too, I was just starting to lose my mind, my mental health was deteriorating. So I just wrote this weird stream of consciousness. It was just a bizarre rant that I just sat on my bed one night staring at the wall and just pumped out, and not from a place of good mental health. So, and I couldn't play that song and sing at the same time. So live, we just played the song. There was no lyrics. So, but then we went to do it and record it, and I had this weird, whatever that was. And Mario, meanwhile, had written some other bizarre lyrics, and he just wanted to throw them on top of something. So we're just going there, and you just record yours, I'll record mine. We won't even listen to one another. We'll just put it in each ear. And, it's just a bizarre song.
Still sounds great. It's you said that you thought that what could have been the next gathering of songs would have been horrifying, but everything you described sounds like a really good thing.
Yeah,
really interesting.
It would have been interesting. But there was, we were disintegrating anyway, for other reasons. But I do regret. I do wish that we had the recordings of a few of those songs. There are kind of actually this album that's coming out. A few of them are literally a cassette tape in the corner of the room kind of recordings of some of them, just to give kind of a hint. Yeah, this album that's
the Echo thing that's coming out.
Yeah. I just got handed a copy from Jason yesterday. So
how is it?
How is it?
It looks nice.
Yeah, it's good. Album. It's got a 900-page booklet in it, full-size booklet. Awesome. Centerfold pictures. All kinds of cool stuff. So, and the 20,000 words of my rantings. So
I'm really looking forward to it.
But most importantly, though, let's give it the most important thing of any record is the orange vinyl. That's that's what the Neils are all about. Just about orange. So anyway, sorry. It would have been nice to have a few recordings of those songs, but
the dedication that the band had was really apparent through, especially through. I've never even seen the End All Discrimination record, but I did actually own the second one, and just the amount of dedication, not just the music, not just the lyrics. And I thought the lyrics were very astute and thoughtful for
15, 16-year-old.
Yes, and I was like, I had lofty, I mean, not lofty, but what's a good way of putting it? Very noble sort of thoughts for young males with no real actual life experience, but just, you can tell there's definitely some intelligence behind these statements, and they're a little more astute than a lot of the subject matter of a good deal of those bands from back then. So I remember being quite taken by a lot of the stuff that you were saying, and then to complete everything, the package, there's a lot of dedication in it, because the packaging is so elaborate, and you've created your own sheet music, and there's that picture of Pete Townsend, and you're cracking on him in the corner of one of the foldouts, and it's this real. It just seems like that record, more than a lot of records, more famous and not as famous, really represents this super dedication of young people doing something for themselves, finding their way, and creating their own universe in it. Like, there was this complete universe in that 14-song 7-inch, which a lot of care went into that. And I think that's maybe the other reason why the Neos, being at the point of age, I can always look back fondly on that record, because it just seems so, the dedication was immense. Not saying that a lot of those other records weren't done by people that were equally as dedicated, but it seems like you guys really just went the extra mile for packing as much stuff in this fucking record as possible. And ending that statement before you answer or offer your thoughts on it was, I watched that clip of Andy Kerr talking about meeting you guys and seeing you guys, and telling the story about how you guys would basically sort of try to punish yourselves and get more uncomfortable while you were just like powering through your blistering set of songs. Like, did you guys drink a lot of coffee and wear parkas or turn on the heaters, or what? Can you explain?
Yeah. Well,
is that another level of dedication to suffer for your art?
Yeah.
As 50-year-olds in Victoria?
Yeah. You just touched on a whole bunch of stuff, so I'll just ramble and you can edit freely as you like. But
okay.
So it starts with, one thing for me still about music, every time you're making music or any art, I think you're making a decision about how much you want it to come from inside and how much you're referencing other people, what they're doing, what people might want. Right? It's so crucial when you're making art to, like I said, you're just making a decision. You're either making a decision to make something that people will relate to, like that that has it's not just an audience, but you're trying to guess, or you're trying to understand what people want, what they like.
Sure.
Great, and that's a completely one way of making art, and I have no problem with it. I'm sure most of the art I consume has at least some element of the people going, well, let's just not make something people will hate, let's make something good. Or you just try and shut all of that out, and you just really just go inside, and you just try and say, what are the things that pop into my head? What would I want to see? What excites me? What gets me going? And it's not that you're not influenced by other people, like you absolutely are, but you're just not thinking about that at the time. You're trying to be your own weird self as much as you can. So, we are pretty weird when you're 13, 14, 15. You haven't really figured out how things work yet. So if you just you just go there, and for us, definitely it was like everybody can do whatever they want, right? So we're putting the cover together. It's like, Kev, just send me, just cut out little pieces of paper that got your stuff on it. We'll just find a way to glue it all in there. It should just be completely random thoughts of these people who haven't figured anything out yet. So I like that element of it. To some degree, it's probably the Dead Kennedy sleeves and stuff have a certain influence where you're going, we can just cut and paste and put all the stuff together. But theirs had some cohesion and some message. But anyway, so that was, and I think it was also super important to be uncool. The reason there's pictures of my parents in there and me sitting on the potty when I'm 2 years old, and dorky pictures of us, because like, let's never for 1 second try to be cool at all, right? Like, let's just, that's so uninteresting when people are trying to figure out what's current and cool. It's just so dull. So let's make sure we put enough stuff in there to make to people know that there's nothing cool about this band, because that's the people I wanted to connect with, right? Other weirdos. Like, we didn't, it's kind of, it's that funny thing when you, a lot of punk kids, you're sort of, I had gone through a cool phase where I was actually cool with people, thought I was in whatever, a happening person, but it was such a dull place to be. So you basically, I think you have kids who kind of understand what cool is, or kind of know that, but don't have an interest in it. Anyway, it was just where we were coming from, trying to make sure that there was no mistake that, unlike the people in Vancouver who had their cool scene and all thought they were super cool, and we're pretty aloof and we're pretty, hard to penetrate their world. It was just, it wasn't supposed to be that. So anyway, there's that element of just like, throw in all the obscure, bizarre thoughts in your head. Make sure it's weird, but just, it's just unfiltered and unedited, which means there's too much of everything. There's too many songs and they're too fast, and there's too much sleeve and there's too much everything, because it's just, nobody went, well, okay, this has gone too far. Let's toss this out. We basically, we finished the cover because finally it's like, you have to get it printed and done. Until that last second, you're still just gluing and sticking stuff on and scratching notes over it. And then finally it's like time to go to the photocopy machine. So anyway, that's where that kind of like vibe, I think, of that thing comes from, just that chaotic thing. And now I'm going to apologize because there was a second part to what you were talking about. Or not.
Well, no. Well, I mean, like lyrically, like I said, there was
yes
observations by people that were a lot like me, that had noble intentions, that hadn't really figured stuff out. Still quite a ways off from actually having sex with another person. And then like there's songs there like they're real astute and noble, all things considered, for being as young as you guys were. Like the song about opposition to all violence, even if committed in self-defense. Is that your song or Kevin?
No, that's Kev's song. Kev is a super intelligent guy. I mean, he's, and that's a curse, really, more than anything. It's being hard for Kevin a lot of ways, because he's very intelligent, and was, as a 16-year-old, I mean, the guy was super well read. He was always referencing stuff that I had like no idea what he's talking about, and but opened up a lot of stuff to me. So he could just write these crazy stories and lyrics and do comics, and just seemed to have this whole knowledge of the world and ideas and philosophy and stuff that I didn't know anything about. So I think that's why he was able to put together a song like that, the point was, let's not beat the shit out of each other, but could frame it in like a very intelligent argument. Like, it was like making a nuanced, logical argument, not just like, don't do it, it's fucking dumb. It's like, no, we have to do more than that. We have to actually give people a chance, to rationalize this and to think about it. And I know Kev had, won't tell you the whole story, but he told me like how years later some young punk kid came up to him and said, that song, like, that totally changed me. Like, I used to be like, every Saturday night I'm downtown trying to pick fights with people and brawling, beating the shit out of people, and all of a sudden I listened to that song, and it was just like, I thought, like, what the hell, man? What's the point of this? And I think to me that's like very amazing. That I think there's one person, right? If one person kind of had a second thought about that and gave it another look, that's just super cool, right? So
sure.
So Kev was able to do that. I was like, he's much more logical, and I am still, but was especially then very emotional. So my stuff was all coming from these feelings. And punk was an interesting experience for me, because I think I was a really sensitive little kid, and then I hit about 10 or 11, and the world just seemed like so cruel. So I know people love anarchy, but to me, that was my version of anarchy. Was growing up, just no rules, no law, just law of the jungle. And it just that never worked for me. So I got to a point where I just like, that's it, people are fucking animals, and I just became a real dick. Like I just turned into like, I'm just going to put this hard shell on and just be a prick and just be an asshole to everybody because it's not working for me trying to be nice to people, right? So I did that for quite a few years through junior high school. And then punk rock came along. It was like, well, these guys are the ultimate assholes, right? I mean, they just don't give a fuck about anybody. This is awesome. So it starts with being like, that's the funny thing to me about punk rock is it started as that, just like this is like the template for being a dick. So that's what I'm going to do. And then, but then there was all these ideas infused in it, right? There's these like kind of attitude, but underneath that, there's a lot of questions getting asked about everything, the way the system works, racism, why are people like they are, so then it's made me open up those doors again and like, relook at the world and ask the questions again that I had, those things I hadn't felt about since I was a 10-year-old. And that like led to me this big transformation where I thought, maybe there was a way, maybe there is going to be some way to make the world better, to have, even if it's just a small group of people, like to find a culture, to find a group where you can be decent, rational thinking people that don't just, use the programming. I was programmed Catholic. I was programmed probably to be fairly racist. I was programmed to all the things that we grew up with in the 70s, right? Not care, didn't give a shit about women, didn't really know what they were other than bodies that were walking around in front of us. It's just, you just had all this programming. And I learned to go with the flow, because when you tried to go against that flow, at least, up here, that was not a good thing. Like you just basically get the shit beaten out of you or get, be on the outside. So you look.
It was no different anywhere else. The individual is always the first person that has to be destroyed at all costs, no matter how old the individual is at any given time. That's what people fear the most, is somebody that doesn't feel like they have to go along with everybody else.
Exactly. Panic, right? It just instant panic when people came across that. And I still don't understand why, but so we started to go down that road, and then it really just quickly spun me around in like way too short a time. It was probably like a 6-month period where all of a sudden I was like, I have to ditch all of this attitude, all of this macho posturing, all of this shit that I've been like carrying around for these years that aren't me at all. And so it made it really difficult for the people around me. Like, friendships just crumbled, everything. And then in the Victoria punk scene, we're lucky because you had you had basically the Dayglow abortions, which were the ultimate, like, steal, fuck, get high, beat the shit out of each other. I mean, I like those guys, but they were like the real deal, right? I mean, that was the real crew of them. And then you had like the No Means No crew, who are like, you talk about Andy Kerr. I mean, Andy Kerr is like the nicest person on the planet. I mean, the sweetest person, like the big brother, for all of us, he was like instantly like that big brother who was kind and smart and showed you cool things. And it was nice too. So, we were lucky that it was a really split scene, but there was a very big contingent of these super nice people that were a couple of years older than us. And it kind of gave me hope too. Like, well, they seem to be figuring out a way to be in the world and not be complete assholes. And they're making it happen. So anyway, I became so obsessed with that idea of building a good community, of just finding anybody else I could latch onto who I thought wasn't an asshole. And so those songs are mostly me just in my own little teenage way, calling out to other people who I thought might be like-minded, but also calling out the scene. Because already when that happened for me, I'm like, punk rock scene was so complicated, man. It was like every different element in conflict, like the worst brawling, just the nastiest fucking people, and then like the nicest, sweetest you ever find, right?
Yeah, I always gravitated toward the music and for the creativity that the music inspired, and it was never about getting a mohawk or drinking a 40-ounce by the train tracks and smashing, I never. I was just never attracted to that part of punk rock. So so what you say about your messages and your songs, just like all the rest, that's yours, I'm going to guess.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And probably Sexual Revolution.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Uh, Probably written as a virgin, I would imagine.
Are you kidding? Of course, full on. And the only thing I regret about that, like I was really because we were coming of age and people, it sounds very childish to talk about this stuff, but I think every young person kind of goes through this. But we were coming of age where there started being, people started having sex. Okay, lo and behold, like people around me, or all these kids you grew up with, and they're just little boys and little girls, and now you're growing up and just watching the way the guys, sex was just so it was just this weird thing. It was nothing to do with sex. It was just manipulation. It was just like, how am I going to get from A to B? The discussion about the person you're targeting for your sexual activities is not even like talking about them like a human being. You're just literally it's a jigsaw puzzle to be solved,
because they're basically terrified of women, which is
Which is
unless you were lucky enough to be raised with some sisters.
Yeah.
It's like people have to figure these things out. So so stuff like that, and just like all the rest, and how you were critical of the punk scene. I totally agree, because like for everything that was great about it, there was always another thing that was fucking lame and always sucked.
Yeah.
Like all these rules, all this. I think that's also why I gravitated toward things lyrically. Because it was like, well, there's a lot of fallacies and things that are worth picking on and criticizing, and it's very easy to do.
Yeah. Well, the Meat Man, right? I had a whole conflict with the Meat Man, which basically summarizes like the way I reacted to music. It's like some of the stuff that was in punk records was, people call out 70s misogyny or whatever in 70s rock bands and all this stuff. It's like, give me a break. The punk bands that went down that direction just do it worse or better, depending on how you look at it, than anybody. So there was always tons to call out. And I know I got in trouble with a lot of people in the scene because of that.
Oh, really?
Oh, are you being sarcastic?
I'm not actually. Well, but
No.
then, like getting in trouble then versus getting in trouble like now, because of the internet, everybody's ready to be an asshole 24 hours a day and be critical no matter what you intend.
That's true.
You would have to have a personal encounter with somebody that disagrees with you, or you'd have to wait a few months, and then they'd see you and go, you know what? I think you're full of shit. I saw what you read. I read that interview or whatever. And that also does not exist anymore, obviously.
Yeah. And I think it's important to call yourself out. Like often with Neo's lyrics and stuff, no sooner had they come out than I would be rethinking it. You're just evolving so quickly that you're reading these lyrics and going, it's not exactly how I would have wanted to say that. Now that I'm another 6 months down the road and I'm so much more older and wiser, I would have said this. With that particular song, The Sexual Revolution, it was, knowing I'd given up on guys already, right? I basically hated. I was going through a phase with my dad and every male in the world that I just hated any males at all. They're scum. So I was already there. So I didn't have any faith in them to do anything, different. But I was going through a phase too, where I really always actually got along super well with girls. Like when I was a little boy, I really loved their energy and how they were so different than us, and really connected with them. So I always had a lot of friends or, who were girls. And so I started watching it go by where, they were, I'll call it being victimized, but they were like getting into situations with guys that clearly after the fact made them extremely uncomfortable, extremely unhappy. And I sort of felt like, but it's something I didn't understand at the time, just know how complicated it is for girls, for a lot of people. I just had the frustration too about just saying no, right? It was just don't connect with these assholes. That's where I was. So some of that frustration was aimed at, I think wrongly, partially at them.
I learned about Bobby Sands through your record.
About which?
Bobby Sands.
Oh, Bobby Sands. Yeah. That actually.
I read all about that, and then I just kind of went.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another funny song because actually that was originally written by. So I started a band with a guy named Dave, right? He was out of the band sort of before we got really rolling, but he started another band with some friends. And anyway, that was actually a song that they originally did. And it was about Bobby Sands, and his take on it was that, Bobby Sands was an asshole because by sort of promoting violence in his cause, he was just causing a lot of other people to get killed. And then, but then I started digging into the whole Irish thing. Like I read a whole lot about the troubles in Ireland, and yeah, it was just again, it's nothing. It turns out to be so much more complicated, right? You start
Like
trying to understand politics. It's
like everything.
yeah, like everything, and so that's the difference, right, between being a teenager and being an adult. Now you just see everything is so complicated that I'm not trying to fix anything anymore. I'm just trying to carve out a small space in the universe where I can exist without wanting to throw myself off a balcony. So
You'll just go crazy if you keep like I appreciate anybody that if they feel they need to speak out against something, they should, and I understand that. But it's like I'm tired, I just I'm not saying it's a young person's game to be idealistic before your dreams get crushed by adulthood.
But you just did, and I concur.
Yes.
Good for them. I've sort of gone through a short old man phase where it was like, what are these kids yelling about? For God's sake, just go cut the lawn, stop ranting. But I've gotten past that now and realized, that is the role of youth. Well, you still got some hope. You've got to point out what you think is wrong. You've got to have a little hope for it to get better. And if it's a bit strident, God forbid, young people should be strident like we never were. Let them be, and take your lumps. If they've got just as much reason to shout at my generation for sure as anybody else. So it's like, I get, the frustration. I'm frustrated too. So have at it. Have at me. I'm good.
Middle-age frustration is still frustration. And also it's like, I don't have the answers. I never had the answers in the first place. And the more I'm still here and still alive as time goes on, the more I realize I know less about things, and I'm less sure about things as time goes on.
For sure. And I think learning now more about history, and I mean, don't just like recent history, but kind of the whole stream of human existence. It's like you grew up in a time and you think, oh, the world is like this, and we've been figuring things out along the way, and we just have like one more little step to go, and then it's all going to be fixed, right? Young people just want to take that one more step, and then it's all going to be good. Whereas now I realize we are just an ongoing experiment. Humans have tried like every possible way of existing together for, hundreds of thousands of years. It's never going to get fixed. But, I still want to live in the best possible existence I can, in the best community I can, but I don't have an expectation anymore of it's about to get solved. And then, then we're going to be in nirvana, and then it's all going to be good after that.
Yeah,
like,
human behavior, there's a lot of, I think it's all about trade-offs. There's good things and there's bad things, and that's.
Yep. If you want
that's really pretty much, that's pretty much it.
And the other one, I mean, I was suicidal for a period of time as a teenager because of feeling like if I can't live in a perfect world, then fuck it, right? If I can live in a perfect world, then I'm out. I'm done. I don't want to live around this messy, disgusting chaos. It's just too much for me to handle. But yeah, you've got to come to terms with that. You've got to learn to live with it and find your little space, because I mean, that's the choice, right? If you can't, that's the only other choice you have. So I chose to eventually to like learn to find that space to exist in.
So did that happen after the band eventually broke up and you just kind of moved away from the involvement of all the stuff? Well, these are actually the last questions.
This has been a lot of fun, so keep them coming.
Okay, great. You guys disbanded in 1983?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely personal differences, especially between the drummer and I, who had really, started out as friends, and we were just growing into really different directions. I think his frustration, I mean, I had been, at least for a year before that, really in a bad mental state, like, really in what I now understand to be a very deep depression and very like almost to the point of psychosis kind of state of mind. So I think I'm sure that I was not super, I don't think I acted it out at all. I think I tried to hide a lot of that or contain a lot of that. And I think it was a frustration for him because he was very much just a, get up and go, high energy. Like I was tired of this mopey, tearful, mopey weirdo hanging around, trying to write jungle beat songs instead of just, blasting. So and so there's a lot of personal stuff there, and musically it was really getting hard to understand what in God's name we were doing. And you'd play those new songs live and people would just stare in disbelief at, so as if they weren't in disbelief enough about what we had done previously. Now it was really just too much. We tried playing that, we went on this little tour down to California. That definitely cured us of ever wanting to play outside of Victoria again. So high school was over, and it just was just all the reasons why you just end. And just was time to end it.
Right. And we, it's kind of funny, we're talking about this extremely small slice of your life here. Mm-hmm. And we're obviously not going to get into what you've done for almost 40 years afterwards, but life went on. You're a father. You're probably doing your own thing. You're working. You're probably involved in music a little bit here and there, or have been, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Am I describing it?
Yeah. You've got that pretty right. I did Kevin and I played together for a couple of years after the band broke up, making weird little songs. And I think we put together a 60-minute cassette, which we packaged up and sold 10 of them in the local record stores just for a kick. What
was that called?
Harvest of Seaweed.
Nice.
And then I played in this weird kind of mutant pop band for a little bit in my early 20s, just a local thing, just again really weird music that I didn't want anybody to like, and was pretty successful at that. So
another triumph.
What's that?
Another triumph.
Yeah, well, actually that I left that band when the other guy started doing exactly what I said, where he was like, oh, did you see that audience like that one song we played last night? We should play more songs like that. And I was like, oh, that's the death of me. No, you just said they like that song, we should play more like that. That's exactly the opposite reason why I'm in this band. They're supposed to be completely annoyed. Yeah, they're supposed to be very annoyed and confused by what we're doing. So so then I really just then it was, I started working and had a kid, and life's expensive, right? The world is like, I've always just been like, I got no particular skills. I got to work my ass off. That's the only skill I have. So just did the usual stuff. And I did, funny for me, like I literally almost forgot about the Neils, so much not wanting to even think about that time in my life, fearing that if I started thinking about that time in my life, I would go back. I still had ongoing struggles a little bit with depression or being on the borderline of it as an adult. So it was really like, it's like an addict who's going to stay away from the bar. I was just like, I don't think I should really go to this place.
I think I understand, because even though I'm coming to you with these golden memories of how I interpreted those times in your band, it was also a period of time where you were dealing with some unpleasant stuff, and mental illness was one of that. So it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to really be the gatekeeper of these memories or think too much about it. And meanwhile, I'll hear once in a while from somebody, that I maybe don't even know.
Oh, I lost you, Brian. I lost you. Oh, sorry, I lost you there for a sec. Your stream lost for a sec. So can you say that again?
Yeah, I was saying, I think I can understand that, because the people like me will come to you with this interview, for instance, and we're talking about how these things that you did were really influential on me, and I appreciate it. But at the same time, for you, it was not a great period of time, dealing with mental illness. So to go back in time, to even go into that period is, it's like being the gatekeeper for a bunch of unwanted memories. And does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's okay now, because what actually happened was when my son turned about 10, I still love music. He loved music, still a huge part of my life in different ways. And I wanted him to experience, going to, look, it's a totally different thing. Like, maybe I take him to see Weird Al at the big theater in town or whatever, right, when he's a kid, and have a lot of fun. But going to see in a little tiny room with a bunch of musicians right in your face. It's just such a different thing. So I started taking him to a couple of shows. And actually, it partially started because I don't know if you know who the Evaporators are, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, you know, that crew out of Vancouver.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know you.
Yeah. So he's a real archivist kind of guy. He really likes to dig into the obscurities and all of that stuff, right? So somebody told me that I should go see their band. They were coming to town. I hadn't been to a punk show in years. I had no idea what was going on in the music scene. So I went to the show. I took my 10-year-old, and I just thought it was awesome. It was like typical Victoria, weird. The bill was like, I don't know, every kind of weird, different music, you know, pop bands and hardcore bands and metal bands and just a whole array of, you know, these weird teenagers playing in this little hall. And the Evaporators were like the headliner. And I'm still then like, nobody knows who the names are. Nobody's like, it's a done. It's just whatever, right? At that point, I had no idea anybody knew about it. And of course, I meet Nardwuar, and he's just like, oh, the Neos, you know, and he's starting like, what? You know, he's like telling me, oh, yeah, the Neos this, the Neos that. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And then I go to a couple more. He came back, and the next time he's playing, he's like, I'm standing in the audience, and he singles me out, all these like 16 and 17-year-olds around. You know, I'm like 45, and he like points me, he's like, it's Steve Bailey from the legendary Neos, you know, and he's making this big deal about the show just stops, and I'm just standing there going, oh God.
Everyone's turning around going.
Yeah, they're all looking at me. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. So then I go on my life, and I'm literally like shopping in the grocery store, and this 16-year-old, you know, watermelon stalker stops me in the grocery store and goes, are you Steve Bailey from the Neos? And I'm just like, yes. And I've forgotten about this whole show. I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? And I kind of got to know these kids, these like 17, 18-year-olds who are now like 28-year-olds, particularly these guys in this grindcore band called Six Brew Bantha here in town. I didn't know what grindcore was. I had never heard this word before. And so I sort of got like bought into this scene, and there was these local kids. So I never, like nobody in Victoria ever really liked this. So there was this like crew of these Victoria kids who were 25 years younger than me, who started talking to me about the Neos and listening to them when they were 14, and one, you know, this whole kind of myth about the Neos, and they've all played in these grindcore bands, and I could hear their music, and I could go, I can actually see the link, like I can actually kind of hear this link. And I started being like, okay, I have to deal with this, because there's something going on here that I don't really understand, that people are still referencing this in some way, that there's some knowledge of this. It's too weird for me that they want to talk about it. So I started, you know, going to shows and figuring out what was going on in the punk world now. And eventually, like 3 or 4 years ago, I actually built an all ages club, a not-for-profit, no alcohol, really cool little space. It was an obsession. It was the stupidest thing. I got obsessed with this idea because going to all these shows in these shitty little halls and all this stuff and terrible sound. And I got like, we can do better than this.
Yeah.
So I built this thing, and I tried to create my fantasy of what, when I was like 17, what would be my fantasy of a place to go, you know, safe, you know, assholes not welcome, you know, great sound, cool place. And it was a lot of fun. Like, it was an incredible amount of work. It was a ton of fun. It's probably dead now. COVID kind of like, it was already like, I found that so much more difficult than I'd imagined, because the same old stuff came up where it's like, you've got these super nice kids, just like talented, just these really cool people. And then you've got these complete fucking morons who come in there, smash shit up, go puke in the parking lot, take a dump in the, you know, whatever. And they're just, and you're just begging them like, I can't do this shit, you know, like you have to stop. So it's been the whole cycle again, but now I can take it as like, I understand it now, right? It'll always be there. And you can try and do a nice thing for the nice people, but it's not going to solve the problem. You're still going to have to fight off these other people.
People are people. That's just how it is. You know, there's good people, there's bad people, and that's really ultimately how it goes.
So because of that movie that got done, and now Jason's putting out this record. Anyway, the last 10 years has been a slow crawl for me back into accepting like that this happened, that it still has some resonance for some people somewhere. and just kind of thinking that's just kind of a beautiful thing. Like I can't,
It kind of it is, man. I mean, like to be like, I mean, really, the context of me being or us being the ages that we're at, and
mhm,
like no matter how much time has passed, there's still this little bit of me that like the idea of me talking to you was like, it's cool, man. It's like something that I thought was really important, and even though it's way, way back there at the same
yeah,
time, it still resonates somehow. And I
yeah,
don't really know exactly why. I think maybe the dedication. It's
yeah,
like somebody working hard and being dedicated at expressing themselves in the most honest, best way they can. And I
mhm,
think that's maybe
yeah,
why I
yeah,
still will have a conversation once a year with somebody like Lou Barlow about
yeah,
the Neos, or
yeah,
just people that like a wide variety of different kinds of I'm not like grindcore connoisseur
no,
50-year-old, but
no,
there was just something about it, so it is kind of a nice thing. And
yeah. It's the
know
best, like that's the best person I've ever been. When I was 17, I think in a sense, that's the best I could offer of myself to the world. I realized I couldn't, it was something above what I could actually live with, like what I wanted to be. I couldn't sustain that existence. And that's sort of still painful to me that I can't live in a world where I can be the person that I want to be and still deal with the world around me. So I have to find this compromise, right? I've found this way of living that's got a little piece of both, but it's still in a way nice to go. That was a beautiful thing, like to feel that way and to feel that maybe this could be, but in the end, even just so for us, like when we were in the Neos, every now and then I get a letter from somebody, right? From some little town or whatever. And they're just like, same thing, man. I'm just hanging in, and I just don't know anybody else who's anything like me. And it just is like this tiny little spark that tells me like maybe there's this place out there in the world for me. That mattered completely to me then. Like way more than selling 1,000 records was like one letter from one person. That I'll just tell you briefly. The last show that we played in second last show we ever played, but it was in San Francisco, our only journey out, and it was a typical like. Do you have a second? Because I don't want to take
oh
up
no,
your.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sure.
This seems like
Okay,
the end, so.
I'll wrap it up. But yeah, it's we go down to San Francisco. We were fighting, like we had this hellish drive down there, which by the way my parents took us on tour. I don't know if you know that one. My parents took the Neos on their only tour in their camper van. So
Awesome.
anyway, um fighting and screaming at each other the whole way down. Horrible shows, everything just went wrong. Got to San Francisco, and I think we all knew like this is it. Like San Francisco for me was still kind of the punk mecca. That was more than LA. That was the place I felt I had a connection with. The
Yeah,
music, the band, the early
yeah.
stuff came out of there. So we were gonna go there, we're gonna play, and we're like nobody on the bill. Nobody knows who we are. Nobody gives a shit except Jill Biafra, Timmy O'Hannon. Like these people cared, but nobody else in San Francisco cared.
Right.
So we go down, and it's a show where it's this hardcore audience, a small, like I mean, 75 people, but real hardcore audience. This band played before us that was like amazing. This weird free form jazz. I don't kind of like a no means no, just a weird band that
Yeah.
literally got physically assaulted. Like the audience went up and started to beat the shit out of them in the set. And I said before they did that, actually, we were the three of us were sitting there in the front row watching this. And after every song, we're like, oh yeah, oh my God, yeah, yeah, all right, you guys are amazing, And then we kind of realized nobody else in this room is doing this. Okay. So they're all looking at us and they're looking at them. Then they get up on stage and there's a brawl, and there's a brawl right in front of us in the audience, people getting the shit beaten out of them. And we're like, okay. And then it's like they end and like, and now we're up next. And these people are being eyeballing us the whole fucking time because we clearly are on the wrong side of this equation. And
Right.
we're wearing like our, Adidas shorts and our like button down shirts and just looking like the most, nerds from Canada possible. And I think, but it was great because like I think that was the most intense we've ever played. We just looked at each other and we went like, this is it, man. Like, let's just give these guys everything that we have and see how they react to it. So I think it saved our ass because I mean we've just burned through this set like just and I think they had to give us enough respect to go. These guys look like fucking assholes, but I mean, this is this is the crazy shit they're playing. So they just kind of ignored us. There was no reaction. They all mostly left, but we didn't get murdered. But at the end of it, these four like high schoolers came up to us, two girls and two boys, and they just said, "Oh man, like." That was so awesome. We love the Neos. We never go to shows because it's so intimidating, but we had to come tonight. And it was so great because all these guys just left and we could like dance and we could like be up front and have this great time. It was just like, it was like the perfect ending for me. I was like, that's it right there, right? I'm so happy that you guys came here and said that because that's all I care about. That matters so much. And it just felt like a nice kind of end point to like, that's we can't be in this scene. Like we can't play in this scene. We fucking people are just ridiculous. So yeah, it was just time to get out. But it's nice to have affected a couple of people positively along the way. So
yeah, more than a couple, but
yeah, all right, 10.
Yeah, well, more like 30.